So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me a little bit late. Sorry about that. I've got almost 40 clips on several topics for what I think should be a good show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary between the clips. I won't have all the usual quasi-news political comedy clips this week because those shows are still on break, but as usual, I will be using clips from all the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the regular Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. I'll cover a few topics this week, like Iraq and the indictment of Texas Governor Rick Perry, but the vast majority of the clips will be on the big story this week, the police shooting of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. And before I get to that, since I don't have any new political comedy clips for you this week, I had to try to find my own comedy in the news shows, and the closest I could get was the way Fox and Friends Sunday this morning covered the news that David Gregory is no longer going to be hosting NBC's Meet the Press, and you can see that coverage over in this clip.
David Gregory leaving NBC, but he is not doing it with empty pockets. The ousted Meet the Press host is being paid a whopping $4 million just to leave the company. The New York Post says Gregory's contract went into next year, but NBC was willing to pay up just to get new host Chuck Todd in front of the camera as soon as possible.
The best deal NBC ever got. That was bargain at twice the price, I would say.
Not a fan of
just saying,
Gregory?
It's a good deal.
$4 million.
That's nothing.
All right, let's check in with Rick right.
I don't know. I mean, I was never the biggest fan of David Gregory. I thought he did some good things. Occasionally he'd ask some hard-hitting questions, but a lot of times he seemed a little too lackadaisical. But that whole thing from Fox and Friends Sunday seemed a little harsh to me. You can let me know what you think about it down in the comments section. And the thing about David Gregory leaving Meet the Press is last Sunday there was no mention of it, and now he's gone, so he never really got to say goodbye. They sort of did this goodbye over on Meet the Press. Andrea Mitchell hosted today, although Chuck Todd is going to take over, like they said in that story. And I'll show you this. It was, a very nice review of David Gregory, but it was kind of odd them saying, well, last week was his last week and we forgot to mention it, or nobody ever mentioned it. And also, he didn't himself appear. I guess they couldn't get him on Meet the Press, but they had a statement from him at the end, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show it to you here.
As you may be aware, David Gregory's final show as moderator of Meet the Press was last Sunday. Meet the Press makes a lot of history, and a great deal of it was with David at the helm since he started in December 2008. Vice President Joe Biden made front-page news when he got ahead of the president in 2012 and embraced gay marriage.
I am absolutely comfortable.
And an important moment in the 2012 presidential primaries when David moderated a GOP debate live on a Sunday morning, just 2 days before the New Hampshire primary. Then there was David's landmark interview in Afghanistan in 2010 with General David Petraeus after he took command of U.S. and NATO forces. Before taking the Meet the Press chair, David had a stellar 8 years covering presidential politics and the White House for NBC News, where he covered George W. Bush from the first primaries to 9/11 and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 20 years with NBC News, David has done it all. The O.J. Simpson trial, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, Today's Show guest hosting,
and how you doing?
And when the cameras weren't rolling, dead-on imitations of everyone from Presidents of the United States to Tom Brokaw. Through all the years, David has been true to the traditions of this program and NBC News.
If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
On Thursday, David tweeted, "I leave NBC as I came, humbled and grateful. I love journalism," he wrote, "and serving as moderator of Meet the Press was the highest honor there is. I have great respect for my colleagues at NBC News and wish them all well. To the viewers, I say thank you." As David leaves NBC News for his next adventure, I will miss him as a daily colleague, but I know he will always be a friend.
So you can let me know what you think about David Gregory leaving Meet the Press. That's the review of his career. I don't know if you think there were enough high points in there, but I think the real reason he left and why they bought out the end of his contract is because his ratings weren't that good. He was down to third in the ratings for the Sunday shows. He'd dropped below Bob Schieffer on CBS's Face of the Nation. So I think that's why David Gregory is gone from Meet the Press. Now, the vast bulk of the clips I'm going to show on the show tonight have to do with the shooting of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, which is in St. Louis County. I actually have several things I want to say about it along the way because I lived in St. Louis County, Missouri for about 5 years, and the last few of those years I worked as a public defender in the St. Louis County Public Defender's Office as part of the Missouri State Public Defender System, and so I defended people who were accused of crimes, and the vast majority of my clients who were the indigent people accused of crimes in St. Louis County were African Americans, and there were a lot of racial problems even back then. This is in the late 90s, and I'll talk about it a little more along the way, especially because the prosecuting attorney in St. Louis County is the same guy who was prosecuting attorney when I used to be a criminal defense attorney, Bob McCullough, and there are a few things about him along the way. But first I want to show the news coverage of what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri. Each of the different stations the network sent a reporter in to describe what was going on in Ferguson, Missouri. I noticed first CBS and ABC both sent in African American reporters to talk about it. And first I'll show you the one from CBS. His name is Vladimir, I think his last name is pronounced Duthiers, Vladimir Duthiers, reporting on the latest developments in Ferguson, Missouri from CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
Vlad.
Bob, just hours after Governor Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency here in Ferguson, Missouri, state of emergency beginning at midnight and ending at 5 a.m., hundreds of protesters took to the streets, and there was a brief flare-up of violence as they advanced towards a very large column of police officers. Now, we were in the crowd with the protesters prior to the start of the curfew. At that time, there were about 1,000 people, maybe more, in the streets, milling around, protesting the shooting of the unarmed teenager Mike Brown about a week ago. The crowd thinned out, and by midnight we were only left with about 150 or 200 people still in the street. We were with a column of police officers. Those police officers waited for at least 35, 40 minutes before they decided to move towards the protesters. What we saw, which was very interesting, is they were decked out in that very heavy militarized gear that many people were angry about last week. They started to fire smoke into the crowd, eventually firing tear gas. As we walked along the streets behind them, we picked up these rounds. These are beanbag rounds. They're meant to stun the crowd. When it was all over, Bob, 7 people were arrested for failure to disperse, and 1 person was critically wounded in a shooting by somebody other than police, Bob.
So, yeah, that's the reporter for CBS's Face the Nation talking about what the latest developments are in Ferguson, Missouri. And I thought that was a fairly good report. And then over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Martha Raddatz this morning, they also had an African-American reporter talk about the latest developments. His name is Steve Usunsami, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you his report over in this clip.
As soon as the governor's curfew began, so did the night's chaos.
No justice! No curfew!
Overnight, the SWAT teams moved in, firing smoke canisters and tear gas at people in the streets.
You must disperse the area immediately.
Someone was shot by an armed protester and had to be hospitalized, now in critical condition. Police, who had promised to be kinder and gentler, are now defending their use of tear gas.
We got a report of a shooting victim. They did deploy tear gas in an effort to move back and get to the shooting victim.
All of this comes after Missouri's governor declared a state of emergency Saturday.
No justice! No peace!
During the day, families protested loudly but peacefully. At night, the thieves went to work, robbing and burning down businesses. Black families who met with the governor at a church were furious and made sure to let him know it.
You need to charge that police with murder.
Friday, police finally revealed the identity of the officer who shot 18-year-old Michael Brown. 28-year-old Darren Wilson is a 6-year veteran. He was moved from his home out of fears for his safety. Police then lit the fire by releasing this video of the shooting victim in the middle of what they said was a strong-arm robbery just 15 minutes before Brown died. Video the Justice Department asked Ferguson police not to release. Demonstrators called it character assassination.
I have 2 boys, 19 and 21, and they could have been one of them.
And Steve is with me now. Steve, you've been here all...
Sorry about that. I was just taking the ice pad out from under the computer that I put under there for some of the longer clips. That was the jerkiness at the end. So those were the 2 reports from African-American reporters from CBS News and ABC News about what's going on. Over on NBC News, they didn't use an African-American reporter, but they actually looked into the racial divide in depth using their reporter Kevin Tibbles. So I give them a little pass on that. Not that I'm necessarily judging them, but I'm going to compare them to what Fox News did in just a minute. After I show, this is NBC reporter Kevin Tibbles. After the general report on what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri, they had a more in-depth report on the racial divide in America that you can see in this clip.
A week of unrest and racial tension. In today's America, black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Prison sentences for black men are 20% longer than those for whites, convicted of the same crime. And on average, 100 black people are killed each year by white police officers.
They had to get America's attention. They had to get America to take notice of their pain.
James Clark is a St. Louis community activist who says he sees the disparity every day.
Crime is going up. The perpetrators are now getting younger and younger, and there is a fundamental reason why. Because they're living in subcultures that mainstream would rather act like doesn't exist.
But they do exist, and some maintain there are 2 Americas, one white, one black, and they are not equal. Greg Howard is a columnist who was so outraged, he wrote an essay entitled "America is Not for Black People."
We're seeing so many black men killed by police officers because police officers don't value black men's life as they do that of white people. It's physically easier for a police officer to weigh what a black man's life is worth and to end up feeling that he's justified in pulling the trigger.
Heather McDonald strongly disagrees.
I found the opposite. The criminology profession has been trying for decades to prove that the overrepresentation of blacks in prison or in arrest statistics is a result of criminal justice racism. It is black crime rates that predict the presence of blacks in the criminal justice system, not some miscarriage of justice.
Still, in Ferguson, as in many other impoverished urban communities, the authorities are often seen as the enemy.
Stay behind our line!
After the cameras leave and after young Michael is buried, if we don't reach into the neighborhoods, they'll become more bold. They'll become much more brazen.
The death of a young man in suburban St. Louis resonates across the nation. But will it encourage solutions or create further division? For Meet the Press, Kevin Tibbles.
So I thought that report from Kevin Tibbles was actually pretty in-depth and informative. It didn't go as far into some things as I might like, especially right behind me here. You can see a book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I actually just finished reading that about a week ago, and it has a really good, strong argument about how the drug war and the concentration on black neighborhoods for enforcement of crimes that happen at the same rate in white neighborhoods that just don't get enforced, especially in terms of the drug war, have created a new Jim Crow. It's actually a system of racial control. And based on my experience as a public defender in St. Louis County, I kind of agree with that theory. I have some more problems with it based on my experience as a public defender in Placer County, California, where I noticed a lot of the same criminal justice oppression methods were used against poor white people. And I know that Michelle Alexander actually says in her book that that could be the result of collateral damage against white people, which I'm not sure about that part of the argument. But there wasn't a lot of in-depth coverage of the racial divide and the system of racial control that is behind all this unrest after the shooting of Michael Brown. I'm going to show a couple clips at the end, one from ABC and then one from CNN that kind of get close to broaching that subject. But before I do, I showed two African-American reporters do pretty good reports on what was going on in Ferguson, Missouri. And then I showed that in-depth report from a white reporter, Kevin Tibbles, on ABC. So it's not your race that determines whether you can do a good report, I guess, on the topic. And now I'm going to show the Fox News reporter, Michael Tobin. And his report, I thought left a little to be desired in terms of the point of view of African Americans, and even at the end he even kind of editorialized that the crowds don't understand how the process is supposed to work in terms of being impatient for this officer who killed Michael Brown being arrested. And the coverage actually of the whole Ferguson, Missouri thing was pretty shallow on Fox News. The only person they interviewed was this Fox News contributor who's a former Washington, D.C. homicide detective, which you can see Shannon Bream, who was hosting Fox News Sunday this morning, talk about as she turns it over to the Fox News reporter Mike Tobin over in this clip.
By a police officer. We'll discuss the facts of the case with the former homicide detective in a moment, but first, Fox News correspondent Mike Tobin is live in Ferguson on a very rainy morning. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Shannon. And we did not make it through the first night of the curfew without clashes. You can't really call it widespread. 7 arrests total, most of them centering around this barbecue restaurant that's physically located at the heart of the demonstrations. Now, Captain Ron Johnson of the state police made a point of clarifying that the heavier tactics that were used were not directly related to enforcement of the curfew. Rather, a gun was spotted, shots were fired, one person was shot and taken to the hospital in critical condition. Also, a police cruiser was fired upon. Beyond that, police had information that people had broken into the barbecue restaurant and were up on the roof. So they moved in with the smoke canisters as well as one tear gas canister. Captain Johnson explains.
The operation tonight, because of our initial responses to what was going on at Red's Barbecue and the shooting, were operational responses, and the response was not related to the enforcement of the curfew.
As much as Captain Johnson entered this process a hero, embraced by the community as he embraced it, we are seeing a community that's growing impatient with him, in part because he didn't use enough force to stop the looting, on the other hand for using too much force and repeating the scenes of the near nightly clashes with police. At a press conference yesterday, he was heckled by people who want punishment for Officer Darren Wilson and aren't taking the time to understand the process. It can really be summed up by one heckler who shouted out over the crowd, "Let me get this straight. You have the authority to suppress the people, but you don't have the authority to arrest a killer cop." Shannon?
So you tell me what you think down in the comments section. Was that report from the Fox News reporter Mike Tobin more apologetic for use of force by police and more critical of the actions of the crowd, and especially that last part about the crowd not understanding the process? Because I mean, if they wanted to, they could have arrested the police officer. You can arrest someone before there's an indictment if all you have to do is have probable cause based on witness statements that he shot a guy who had his hands up and was trying to surrender, which there are several witness statements that say that, although that may not be what every single witness says, so we'll have to wait to see how that investigation turns out. And like I said, the coverage on Fox News was pretty shallow. I'm not even going to show their interview with Ron Wheeler, the former homicide detective, but they were the only one of the 5 big networks that I take clips from that didn't have Jay Nixon, the governor of Missouri, on. But they explained that in a clip that I'm also going to show from Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday after her little discussion on Ferguson, Missouri, where she explained why Jay Nixon wasn't there over in this clip.
Thank you, Shannon.
And by the way, we extended an invitation to Missouri Governor Nixon to join this program. He is doing 4 other Sunday shows today, but he declined our request. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I don't know. I think Jay Nixon may have a good reason, the Democratic governor of Missouri, why he might not want to go on Fox News Sunday. And I noticed that Fox News Sunday was the only one of the networks that had Texas Governor Rick Perry on, the Republican governor who was just indicted this last week. And Fox News didn't seem to complain about that. I'm going to have a few clips on the whole Rick Perry indictment near the end of the show, but I want to show several more clips on what's going on in Missouri, the Ferguson, Missouri thing. And the next several are going to be from Governor Jay Nixon, because he was on all 4 of the other shows, almost a full Ginsburg. And that's William Ginsburg, the Monica Lewinsky attorney, who I think was like the first one to do all the shows, and so they call it doing the full Ginsburg. And so here's Jay Nixon over on NBC's Meet the Press, where Andrea Mitchell asked him about, let me just make sure I get this right. Oh, this is where she asked him about the shooting of Michael Brown, and when we're going to have answers about that, I think is in this clip, and he just doesn't really give a good answer, as you can see here.
Being with us. Tell me, why has a full week elapsed and we still do not know anything? The public wants answers to what happened between Michael Brown and the white officer who shot and killed him.
Well, it's been a challenging week with the horrific death of Michael Brown, shot down in the streets of his hometown, and the appropriate energy and angst that everyone's had around there. I think with the dual investigations going on right now with the Justice Department and with the local prosecutor, and I'm especially appreciative, after talking to General Holder, I've appreciated them sending in 40 additional FBI agents to make sure that they're moving to get a thorough investigation, to get justice here, and I appreciate that the response and that energy to make sure that they get this right.
Well, I guess that dual investigation answer isn't so bad. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But next I want to show another clip from Jay Nixon. This is from his interview on State of the Union. CNN's Candy Crowley asks him about this, what happened last night, how there was this curfew imposed and there seemed to be a lot more heavy-handed response. And you can see Jay Nixon trying to defend himself from that questioning on CNN this morning here.
Here this morning, the man you put in charge of security, Captain Johnson, said after last night that he was disappointed in what happened. There was some violence, some arrests. Did you have any concern when you considered the curfew? Do you have any concern now that it could be counterproductive?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's been quite a week. The shooting of Michael Brown, a young 18-year-old in his own hometown, shot down in the street, brought emotions out very raw and appropriate. And as we moved through the week, when we saw the militarization of police response, I thought the best thing to do is bring the Highway Patrol in late in the week, bring in Captain Johnson, and get involved with a less hard look. That went well for until the second night, and then we had some agitation. Last night's curfew, I think everybody worked well. We're always disappointed when things aren't perfect, but thousands of people spoke last night, thousands of people marched, and not a single gunshot fired by a member of law enforcement last night. And the members of the community tremendously helpful last night to get through what could have been a very difficult night.
And that whole thing about militarization, I think Governor Jay Nixon at least has the talking point down about how militarization isn't really good for the situation. And I'm going to show a short clip of him over on CBS's Face the Nation talking about, the week of the Michael Brown killing and how it was, a terrible week, and about how he thinks how Governor Jay Nixon thinks his reaction made things better, and he talks about militarization a little more. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you the clip here.
Well, we feel much better. Obviously, when we saw in the middle part of the week the increased militarization of the police response and the response from the community, I mean, this has been a week in which Michael Brown was shot dead by a police officer in his own hometown. And that has brought out great emotions and appropriate concern. And so when we saw that increased militarization, I made the unique action to put our highway patrol and then bring in Captain Johnson on the ground in that community, from that community, to help lead that. That first night was pretty peaceful. The second night went relatively well until very late, and we saw some looting, and that's why I declared a curfew with the request from the local officials. And last night, no property damage of any significant sort, and of the thousands of folks there, certainly there were 7 folks that had to be detained and arrested, but most of those folks aren't directly from that area. So we're hopeful that we're making progress. I think it's right for people to grieve. I think it's right for people to speak, and it's important that we get justice in this matter, and the dual investigations being done by the local prosecutor and justice will come to their conclusion.
So yeah, there's Missouri Governor Jay Nixon going back to the dual investigation talking point. And with the dual investigation means that the St. Louis County prosecutor Bob McCullough is investigating the shooting to see if there should be, and will present it to a grand jury to see if there'll be charges. And at the same time, the U.S. Justice Department, Eric Holder, and the Obama administration has sent FBI agents, and they're doing their own parallel dual investigation. And over on CNN's State of the Union, Candy Crowley asked Governor Jay Nixon how long it should take to get this in front of the grand jury. And he went back to his talking points, some of the same you've heard. But then at the end, you'll see he actually says that St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough really has to step up and take the initiative. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip over here.
Are we in the judicial process from the local point of view? When do you expect a case would be ready to present to a grand jury?
Well, you have two separate investigations. I was happy. I mean, I talked just the other day to a long talk with General Holder. Based on that, they put 40 FBI agents working in St. Louis yesterday, in this region yesterday, to accelerate that process for that parallel investigation. I think it's a time for the local prosecutor to have the opportunity to step up. I know everybody's working really hard. It's important we get this right. This is a big matter. Clearly, the death of an 18-year-old at the hands of a law enforcement gun is something that's caught a nerve, not just here in Missouri, but across the nation and the world.
Right.
It's important that these
question,
be done, but done well.
The question is, Governor, when do you think? It seems to me that part of bringing peace to the streets actually would be some sort of action on the judicial side of this. Do you have a sense that we could see a local case? I know you're not in charge of the FBI, but a local case here presented to a grand jury this week, next week, a month from now?
Well, I mean, I'll let the prosecutor speak for himself on what his time frame is. Other than I know that when I talked to Attorney General Holder, that the response to that was to bring 40 additional FBI agents into the region to accelerate those interviews. And I think all the folks are accelerating interviews, but they're going to get this right. And everybody's working really, really hard. This is going to be something that, if to get justice, it has to be transparent justice and it has to be thorough justice. And there are a lot of witnesses and a lot of folks concerned about what went down and what justice can be. So I think that, well, I know they're working very hard, and I know that those additional resources yesterday were really felt. And I know that it's time for the local prosecutor to step up, and I'm confident the Justice Department will, with the additional resources and focus here, that General Holder and the FBI and folks are going to get the information and get it to the proper choosing authorities, in my sense, in a timely fashion.
The proper choosing authorities there that Governor Jay Nixon was talking about, I think he means the grand jury, and he did sort of put pressure on St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough to do the right thing and actually get the grand jury in St. Louis County to indict this officer who shot Michael Brown. And I also want to show you a clip from NBC's Meet the Press where Andrea Mitchell had Governor Jay Nixon on and asked him why it was that the tape got released, the tape of Michael Brown allegedly stealing these cigars from a convenience store like 15 minutes before he encountered this police officer who shot him. And one of the reasons that there has been this unrest escalated because the community doesn't understand why that information got out there so quickly, but the details about the shooting still haven't arrived. And Andrea Mitchell over on NBC's Meet the Press asked Governor Jay Nixon basically that exact question over in this clip.
Well, Governor, there was peace. There was peace on Thursday night after you appointed the county police to come in and take over, the state police rather, to take over from the county. But then the local police chief released that video. What justifies releasing the video about the convenience store while there's still no details about what happened with the shooting itself? That is what caused everything to erupt again on Friday night and eventually led to the curfew having to be imposed.
Yeah, we and our security team and the Highway Patrol did not know that was going to be released. I don't think the Attorney General knew that. And quite frankly, we disagree deeply. I think for two reasons. Number one, to attempt to, in essence, disparage the character of this victim in the middle of a process like this is not right. It's just not right. And secondarily, it did put the community and, quite frankly, the region and the nation, on alert again. These are old wounds. These are deep wounds between in these communities, and that action was not helpful.
Well.
And Governor Jay Nixon not only said that the action wasn't helpful, releasing that tape of the alleged strong arm robbery that Michael Brown allegedly committed before he was shot. He also told Andrea Mitchell on NBC's Meet the Press a little later that he had a strong conversation with the Chief Jackson, Ferguson Police Chief Jackson, about having released that tape, and I'll show you that over in this clip.
Well, everyone can rest well assured that we've had very serious discussions about that action and how much we thought that it was not the right way to handle the victim's family, which I had a chance to speak with. They were deeply troubled when you see your son gunned down in the street, and then you see a police chief begin an attempt to attack his character. That's just not the way to operate, and we've made that clear to everyone. And our hope and expectation is that now that our folks are in charge of security and we have these dual investigations going on, that bump is behind us, hopefully.
Well, Governor.
So it sounds like there was an intense conversation between Governor Jay Nixon and Ferguson Police Chief Jackson after he released that tape, or unless you think he's not telling the truth, which I guess he could just be doing it theatrically for political effect. And I want to show one more clip of Jay Nixon on the whole release of the tape issue, where he actually told ABC's Martha Raddatz that he didn't know that the police chief from Ferguson, Missouri, was going to release that tape, which I thought was worth showing over in this clip.
But you understand why people were angry all over again this week. You saw Chief Jackson go out and present that surveillance video. Did you want that presented? The Justice Department didn't.
Yeah, we were unaware that they were going to release it, and we certainly were not happy with that being released, especially in the way that it was. It appeared to, cast aspersions on a young man that was gunned down in the street. It made emotions raw, and one of the reasons why, after the first night of bringing in a highway patrol and Captain Jackson, we had a pretty calm night that first night. That second night, late, we saw folks get upset, and that's why we got the curfew last night. I'm really proud of everybody's effort last night, especially from the community. With thousands of people out there, only 7 arrests, the majority of those from outside the area, not a single shot by a police officer. I thought that last night, with the help of the community, a solid step forward was made.
So Missouri Governor Jay Nixon kind of going back to his talking points again at the end there, but partway through there he did mention that he didn't know that the police chief of Police Chief Jackson from Ferguson, Missouri, was going to release that tape until he actually saw the tape had been released. So I thought that was an interesting fact. And then I want to show two more quick clips from Governor Jay Nixon. This is on the problems with the St. Louis County prosecutor, Bob McCullough. Like I said, I have a special interest in this aspect of the story because Bob McCullough was the prosecutor back in the late 1990s when I was actually a public defender defending cases in that same St. Louis County courtroom where Bob McCullough is the head prosecuting attorney. And I want to show first here is a clip of Andrea Mitchell over on NBC's Meet the Press asking if Bob McCullough hasn't already shown that he's biased against this whole process or has a conflict of interest because of the way he said that it was illegal to send in the state highway patrol. I think Andrea Mitchell mistakenly says sending in the county police, but it's actually the state police over in this clip.
But why is it taking so long? And you also have a county prosecutor who many say has a conflict of interest here because he said that he disagreed strongly with your decision to bring in the county police. He called it shameful, saying that he thought that was, in fact, an illegal decision. So how is he the person that would be trusted by this very angry and resentful community to come up with answers that are credible?
Well, he's a seasoned prosecutor that has an opportunity to step up here and do his job. And also, though, when you see a dual investigation going on and the resources of the Justice Department and FBI agents out working in the community yet again yesterday, 40 additional officers, I think that having those dual investigations will help guarantee that this gets done in a timely fashion, that it's done thoroughly, and that it gets justice.
I think it's kind of funny that the nicest thing that Governor Jay Nixon can say about the St. Louis County prosecutor, Bob McCullough, is that he's a seasoned prosecutor, which I think basically means he's been in his job for a really long time. And that's definitely true. And the last clip I want to show is also of Governor Jay Nixon responding to some of the problems with the St. Louis County prosecutor, Bob McCullough, this time specifically about the fact that he doesn't prosecute police or has a long history of not being willing to prosecute police who do things like shoot unarmed black teenagers. Or I can't name you all the cases, but I do remember that reputation back in the 1990s, and I guess it's still continued. And you can see this is the last Jay Nixon clip. This is CNN's Candy Crowley asking him about the problems with Bob McCullough. I don't think he calls him a seasoned prosecutor here. He says he's an experienced prosecutor, and that's about the nicest thing he can say over on CNN's State of the Union this morning in this clip.
Complaints and criticisms, as you know, of the St. Louis County prosecutor that would do this case, Robert McCullough, saying that in previous cases he has not been aggressive in pursuing police abuse or abuse by police. Do you think someone else is better suited, would be better suited to push this case forward?
Well, he's an experienced prosecutor, and it's his opportunity to step up. I think also in this situation,
but you're kind of suggesting to me that
Justice,
thus far he hasn't, so that's why I'm asking.
well, I mean, they're out doing the investigations, and the charging decisions have not been made, and you know, everybody understands, and he said in public that they're going to present evidence to a grand jury. So I think that the dual parallel investigations of justice and the local really add both they just help. They help tremendously to make sure that all the information is getting out, that's being done in an organized fashion. And I like I say, I appreciate the parallel investigation being done by the Justice Department in some situations, I would think with some of the detectives and whatnot. That's the kind of independent, external, national review and investigation of this that I think will assist everyone in making sure we get to justice.
Sorry about that delay. So that's the last clip I want to show you of Missouri Governor Jay Nixon. I liked how he called Bob McCullough experienced and asked him to step up, which, as Candy Crowley pointed out, he is had said before that he hasn't stepped up so far. And I wanted to show you those clips, and there are several other clips on the Ferguson, Missouri police shooting of Michael Brown I want to show. These are some other people on some of the shows. Like I said, Fox News Sunday didn't do a very in-depth or extensive coverage of Ferguson, Missouri, and you can tell me down in the comment section why you think that might be. But I want to show some of the other guests who had some good comments. First, the new president of the NAACP was over on CBS's Face the Nation, and he talked about the problems with the St. Louis County prosecutor, and then he also talked about the problems with the Ferguson Police Department. I think, if I remember correctly, he said he would compare them to the Keystone Cops if he wasn't afraid of insulting the Keystone Cops. I guess that's a little bit more political comedy and what's not a very funny situation over on CBS's Face the Nation. I believe the name of the new president of the NAACP is Cornell William Brooks, over in this clip.
The county prosecutor does have an opportunity to step up. He should, in fact, step up. The nation, and indeed the entire world, is watching as he carries out his duties. But I believe it's critically important for a prosecutor to be appointed. I think it's critically important for the Justice Department to remain active and engaged, because this county, this municipality, both have a long history of very troubled relationships with the community. And so, as a matter of community credibility, as a matter of credibility with respect to the nation, they need to step up. They need to step up quickly, and they need to be clear, transparent, and accountable with respect to the community.
How do you just basically think this case has been handled so far?
At the local level, it's been, I would liken it to the Keystone Cops, but I don't want to insult the Keystone Cops. It's been very troubled. The release of the videotape regarding Michael Brown, very, very troubling. Here we have a post-mortem character assassination. Very troubling. The lack of information, the lack of engagement with the community, very troubling. A week ago, I spent time in a church where I heard young people literally asking those on stage, tell us what to do. These local prosecutors, local law enforcement have an opportunity to fulfill their oath, to demonstrate that they're serious about protecting and serving. To do that, they need to step up quickly, and do so in a very transparent fashion.
So I thought that was a worthwhile comment to show from the new president of the NAACP. And then I also want to show you a comment from one of the attorneys for the family of Michael Brown. He's a local. The family of Michael Brown has been represented by Benjamin Crump, who also represented the family of Trayvon Martin. But one of the local St. Louis attorneys who's representing him is a guy named, let me make sure I get his name right here, Anthony Gray Brown, and he talked about the family's reaction to the release of that tape of Michael Brown allegedly stealing those cigars from that convenience store. And you can see they actually show some of the tape in the background. I think they may have shown a little of the tape in the background before, but this is Anthony Gray Brown was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which was hosted by Martha Raddatz, who we talked to over in this clip.
The family to that, and how were they told?
Well, they, first of all, they were very appalled by it. They saw it for the first time, at least a glimpse of it, on nationwide TV. They had requested an opportunity through the attorneys to see any video footage before it was released. That request obviously was not honored. So quite naturally, the reaction was very, on the part of the family, they were very disturbed by it. And I would just point out that no one from the family was given an opportunity to even authenticate that that was actually Mike Brown Jr. in the video.
So yeah, that was the attorney for the family of Michael Brown on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Martha Raddatz. And I want to show another clip from ABC's This Week where Martha Raddatz talked to a St. Louis alderman named Antonio French, who's been doing a lot of tweeting and videotaping, or I guess it's not tape anymore, but video recording of the police, and has become kind of a folk hero during this whole week of unrest. And he talked about how the unrest actually started, what triggered, the beginning of the unrest, when he talked to Martha Raddatz over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which Martha Raddatz was hosting over in this clip.
He became a folk hero after he drove into Ferguson to take videos of police actions and ended up in jail.
Did he have a reason why he was pulling out in your car?
And he said, because I didn't listen.
We walked the path from the makeshift memorial to the so-called ground zero of the unrest following the killing, the Quick Trip gas station on West Florissant Avenue. Then he took us back to where it all started, where it ended for 18-year-old Michael Brown. Michael Brown's body lay there for 2 hours?
No,
most of the day?
Close to 5 hours.
5 hours.
Yeah, close to 5 hours.
And then what really incited things?
So that night, this had really become kind of a memorial site, which included rose petals and little candles right on the site where his body lay. Over the course, a dumpster back behind the apartments, somebody put some barbecue charcoals in there and it caught on fire. So a fire truck came down here and they had some officers with them and they started putting out the fire. They actually had those officers stationed on top of the fire truck. Some people started shouting at those officers and so they called for backup and all of a sudden over a dozen or more police cars came flying down here. So it was just lined up, flashing lights. Got out with the dogs to start getting the crowd back, and it just agitated them even more.
So I thought that was an interesting clip from the alderman, St. Louis alderman Antonio French, explaining how the unrest started on the first night after Michael Brown was killed. And he also talked about how they let his body lie out there for like 5 hours, which I'm going to show another clip about that in a couple minutes. But first, I want to show a clip. This is the congressman from the St. Louis area, William Lacey Clay, who, when I lived in the Central West End, which is part of St. Louis City, not St. Louis County, because the city's not part of the county. Long story, I don't want to go into. But anyway, he was my representative, and he was over on, I believe it was CNN's State of the Union, talking to Candy Crowley, who asked him if he had prejudged everything because he called what happened to Michael Brown, being shot unarmed, raising his hands in surrender. He called that murder, and you can see his reaction. And one of the things I like about this, I didn't show the whole back and forth where they had him and William Carrick, this police officer from New York, on, but they talked about the militarization of police, and you'll see the text down in the lower third chyron says officer friendly turns into G.I. Joe. So I definitely wanted to make sure you saw that over in this clip.
Clay, I'm going to give you the final word on this. You have called this a murder, and I understand, and this is an unarmed 18-year-old shot by a policeman. That much we know. There's a difference of opinion about what led to that. But the day in court, should it come to that, are you already sort of usurping that by calling it a murder?
No, I don't think I'm usurping it by calling it a murder. And I'll say this, that I made a commitment and a promise to Miss McSpadden, Michael Brown's mother, that I will pursue justice with the family at every avenue, be it on the federal level or at the state level. Now, so, what happened Friday with the police chief Jackson releasing the name of the officer and releasing those photos of Michael Brown were totally unrelated to the incident. We should not lose focus of the incident. You had an 18-year-old person walking in the street who was eventually gunned down after he raised his arms to surrender to police. So that has to be addressed, and I want the legal system to take its course.
So at least he wants the legal system to take its course, even though he's already called it a murder. I don't know. I guess that's a little bit borderline for an elected official to prejudge that way, but I guess it's somewhat understandable. And I also want to show you a clip of another elected official. This is not from St. Louis, but Representative John Lewis, who is like hero of the civil rights movement, marched with Martin Luther King, got beaten on the bridge in which bridge was it? Anyway, I'm sorry, it's like I'm blanking on, was it Birmingham? I think he may even mention it here, but anyway, this is John Lewis having shown you that clip from CNN's State of the Union where they're talking about Officer Friendly turning into G.I. Joe over on, this is in NBC's Meet the Press. Andrea Mitchell asked Representative John Lewis about militarization of the police, and he compares the images we've been seeing from Ferguson, Missouri, to the images we see from places like Baghdad over in this clip.
We've got to learn to live together as brothers and sisters, as Dr. King would say, or we're going to perish as fools.
Now, Congressman, I know you voted against it, but does Congress bear some responsibility for the militarization of local police departments around the country?
Well, you know, when I was watching the film footage coming out of Ferguson, it looked like it was in Baghdad or some other war-torn zone. You know, Ferguson is a part of the United States of America. It's not China, it's not Russia, it's not the Congo, it's America. People have a right to protest. People have a right to engage in peaceful, non-violent action. And the press have a right to cover what is going on.
So it's good to see someone say that people have a right to protest and the press has a right to cover, because a lot of what the police have been doing that's been so criticized in the last few days is suppressing people's right to protest. You know, there's a curfew and arresting journalists. There was that, 2 journalists arrested in the McDonald's for no apparent reason, and so that's a lot of the problem. And the idea of there being 2 different kinds of justice, I talked about that a little earlier when I showed that Kevin Tibble's report on how African Americans end up in the criminal justice system at a lot higher rate than, even though they don't really commit crimes at a higher rate. And I talked about this this book right above my left shoulder there, The New Jim Crow, that has a lot of evidence about how the racial disparities are not based on different crime rates. They're based on decisions that prosecutors and police make about where to put criminal justice resources in black communities, and enforcing laws that they don't really enforce against white people and white communities. And I want to show a couple clips that get the closest to talking about this new Jim Crow, about the criminal justice system as a system of racial control. First, I'm going to show a clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they talked to a couple local Ferguson youth, and here's one guy named Brendan Hart talking about how basically the police are racist over in this clip.
This week.
It's just really hard, especially on us, on the young people, on the young African American people. We know the struggle. We've been through this. It's just a lot of dirty cops out there. It's hard because sometimes I don't get looked for my intelligence. I get looked as my color sometimes, and it's hard for me to show people who I am because they already think that I'm this type of person.
And when you say the cops are dirty, have you had experience with that, or the mistrust is just so high?
I had experience, especially my skin color. They'll pull you over, search through your car, slam you on top of the hood, and say things to you, put the handcuffs on your wrist very tight.
When you heard...
So that's a voice you don't hear a lot on the corporate media, even on the news analysis shows. So I'm happy to be able to show you that clip. And actually the clip I think that came closest to talking about... no, I've got it backwards. Every time backwards. It's like looking in a mirror. The new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander's book about mass incarceration and this system of racial control. The clip that comes closest to really talking about that was over on CNN's State of the Union, where they had on, I guess he's an actor who plays a doctor on Grey's Anatomy. It's not a show I watch. His name is Jesse Williams. I wasn't really familiar with him, but I guess he's a fairly famous actor. And he is apparently also an activist, and he talked to CNN's Candy Crowley and really talked about the two different systems of justice in a way that came pretty close to talking about the new Jim Crow over in this clip.
Well, I think that we also have to talk about the narrative and making sure we're starting at the beginning. You will find that the people doing the oppressing often want to start the narrative at a convenient point. We always want to start the story in the middle. This started with a kid getting shot and killed and left in the street for 4 hours. I've never seen a white body left in the street for 4 hours in the sweltering heat. I've never, the cop doesn't call in the shooting. The body isn't put in an ambulance. It's shuttled away in some shady, unmarked SUV. There's a lot of bizarre behavior going on, and that is the story. That's where we need journalism. That's where we need that element of our society to kick into gear and not just keep playing a loop that gets discovered of what the kid may have done or did apparently in a convenience store. That's unfortunate. That if that happened, that's going to be factored in, like it or not. But we need journalism to kick in and start telling the story from the beginning. This is about finding justice for a kid that was shot, an 18-year-old that was shot, period. And this idea that because he stole a handful of cheap cigars, what's that, $5 from a convenience store? I lived in the white suburbs of this country for a long time. I know plenty of white kids that steal stuff from this convenience store. There's plenty of this idea that every time a black person does something, they automatically become a thug worthy of their own death. When it's that we don't own drug crimes. We're not the only ones that sell and do drugs all the time. We're not the only ones that steal. We're not the only ones that talk crazy to cops. There's a complete double standard and a complete different experience that a certain element of this country has the privilege of being treated like human beings, and the rest of us are not treated like human beings. Period. And that needs to be discussed. That is the story. All right, so that's what gets very frustrating, I think, for people, because you don't know five black men in particular that have not been harassed and felt threatened by police officers. Right. You can't throw a rock and find 5 of them.
Yeah.
I cut it off before he says everyone agrees with him, who was also on the panel, and he says we're not making this up, and at least based on what I saw as a public defender in St. Louis County, he's not making it up. And like I said, I have a few questions about Michelle Alexander's, I got it right the first time, the new Jim Crow mass incarceration and how it's a system of racial control. I have a few questions about it because of my experience here in California, where I saw a lot of the same criminal justice tactics targeted at poor white people, and that kind of makes the theory a little bit suspect in terms of it really being a system of racial control. But I want to show you one more quick clip on Ferguson, Missouri, before I get to the Iraq clips. This is a Representative Mike Rogers over on CBS's Face the Nation, and he's discussing his idea on why militarization of the police isn't necessarily a bad idea, because he's a former FBI agent, and so he thinks sometimes you need to increase the force to that level, as he told CBS's Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation this morning over in this clip.
This situation in Ferguson, we're seeing questions raised now, perhaps this program that the Pentagon has had to sell or to give military equipment, surplus equipment, to these police departments around the country. While it was a good idea, it seemed like a good idea at the time, some people are saying maybe this militarization, this look that it gives local police forces may do more harm than good.
Well, every instance should be
I think, gone through very closely and tried to make sure that the equipment that they have is used in the right circumstance. There are circumstances where police officers have been outgunned in the past, which got us to this SWAT teams, these tactical teams with heavier weapons, because they were outgunned. And it's all about that force continuum. As a former FBI agent, law enforcement officer, you're taught about that force continuum. And when do you escalate force? Obviously, your first goal is to de-escalate the problem. It appears that they may have reacted a little quickly with that on that force continuum when they decided to deal with certainly the protesters. Hard to say, sitting 1,000 miles away, but I will tell you that you have to have at least police officers with the ability to have something to meet those particular challenges.
Thank you.
Now, if you... Oh, I did it wrong this time. If you read that book, The New Jim Crow, about mass incarceration, there is an entire section about the militarization of the police and how it's not really a reaction to the police being outgunned. It's not necessary. It had more to do with this free military hardware coming back from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And anyway, that's not the most exciting clip to end on from the Ferguson, Missouri topic and the shooting of Michael Brown, but that's the last clip I want to show you on that. I do want to show you a bunch of clips on what's going on in Iraq, because there have been some developments there, and since I just ended with a clip of Representative Mike Rogers, he's the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee. He was also answering multiple questions about what's going on in Iraq with CBS's Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation. And in the first one, when I talked about this last week, I think I referred to the Yazidis as Christians, which is kind of a mistake. There are also these Christians who are being persecuted and killed by ISIS or ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq, or Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, whatever you want to call it. The group, the former Al-Qaeda, now like worse than Al-Qaeda group that's been taking over territory in Iraq. I referred to the people they were killing, the Yazidis, as Yazidi Christians. Even they're actually killing Yazidis and Christians. The Yazidi religion is a little more amorphous. They I don't really understand it actually, but I want to show you this clip of Bob Schieffer asking the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, about the Yazidis, but he does it even worse than I did. He doesn't refer to them as Yazidis. He refers to them as something else that makes me think they may be one of those Pastafarian religions, that not quite the flying spaghetti monster, but a different type of pasta in Bob Schieffer's question to Mike Rogers on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
So ISIL has said that they want to take the people who have Western passports, and remember...
Mr. Chairman, the administration sent special forces in there to see about rescuing these people. They came back and reported, well, it looked like they'd been rescued, or most of them had. What is the situation out there? Are there still Yazidis in danger?
Oh, absolutely, every single day. And so they've not only surrounded certain villages, the ISIS or ISIL, but they have also pushed them up into the mountains, and they were at least putting pressure at that time on those tribes up into the mountains. And so some escaped, some were still there. It just shows you the breadth and depth of the problem and just how brutal ISIL is in their governing of their version of the caliphate.
I don't know, maybe I stretched a little too far there to get that Pastafarian joke when all Bob Schieffer did was say Zidi instead of Yazidi, but I can criticize Bob Schieffer a little more justifiably, I think, in the way he kind of teed up Representative Mike Rogers on the threat from ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call them, and specifically gave him the whole 9/11. This is actually a second question. It's going to show Mike Rogers talking and then Bob Schieffer asking him about 9/11. But in the original question that Bob Schieffer asked before the start of the answer I show, Bob Schieffer also mentioned 9/11. So he was really feeding the whole 9/11 answer to Representative Mike Rogers, including over in this clip.
So ISIL has said that they want to take the people who have Western passports, and remember, they're flooding into this country. Thousands of individuals now signing up with ISIL to fight their jihad in Syria and Iraq have Western passports. That's what's so dangerous about this. That we also know that they want to conduct an attack, but so does Al-Qaeda. And so now you have two competing terrorist organizations. Both of them want to get their credentials to the point where they can say, we are the premier terrorist organization. Both want to conduct attacks in the West for that reason. And guess what? That means we lose at the end. If either one of those organizations is successful, we lose. And here's something interesting, Bob. We've seen some very interesting relationships between AQ in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP out of Yemen, and Al-Qaeda on a very aggressive, I think the Attorney General said that it was one of the worst, or one of the things keeps him up at night, and I would concur with him. That is an attack that many believe is going operational, and that's what we should be worried about.
Do you think that we're in greater danger now than perhaps we were before 9/11?
I do, again, only because the threat matrix is so wide and it's so deep. We just didn't have that before 9/11. So when you get a terrorist organization that holds land the size of Indiana, has tanks, helicopters, they think it has as much as $1 billion in both precious metals, currency, and by the way, is selling oil on the black market to the tune of about $1 million a day, according to some analytical product. That means you've got a severely dangerous organization that is beheading people. And here's the thing. This is exactly the kind of thing, beheading people, convert or die, burning religious relics from the past. Just the sheer brutality of it is exactly what AP pitches. It's what Boko Haram pitches. When they took those 300 girls, that's what that was all about. That's what they're practicing and putting into practice. That's why this policy of not dealing with it as an ecosystem, I think, is wrong and has caused the spread and danger of these organizations.
Do we?
Well, that sounds like quite a threat, and as you saw, Bob Schieffer kind of teed up Representative Mike Rogers there, giving him the whole idea of the 9/11 threat and getting him to say it was that the United States faces a worse threat than before 9/11, and he asked him that twice. I only showed him asking it once, and I'm going to show not only Representative Mike Rogers hyping the threat, later I'm going to show you how Fox News on Fox News Sunday had their reporter really hype the threat of ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call them, as, inhuman monsters worse than animals, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to show one more clip from Representative Mike Rogers talking about what's going on around the Mosul Dam. I guess that's one of the key infrastructures that is in the contest right now between ISIL and the Kurds. Mosul's up in the north, and what I like about this clip, this is where Bob Schieffer asks him about the status of the Mosul Dam, and he talks about how important it is. And I think by the time this aired, or soon after this aired, I heard breaking news that we've already gotten the Mosul Dam, or the airstrikes have allowed the Kurds to recapture it, or at least the area around it. I haven't been able to confirm that, but anyway, here's Representative Mike Rogers talking about the importance of the Mosul Dam on CBS's Face the Nation this morning with Bob Schieffer here.
Mr. Chairman, the talk also this morning, apparently we've opened a new phase of the air war there. We're attacking these ISIL people around this dam in Mosul. Explain to us what that's all about and the significance of this dam.
Yeah, sure. So the Peshmerga, before, there was some reports that they had retreated from the area prematurely, and they were disappointing in their fighting. The problem was they were outgunned. ISIL now is a terrorist organization with an army. That's what makes them so dangerous. Tanks, helicopters, heavy artillery, money, all of those equate to a pretty dangerous situation. So the Peshmerga had a strategic withdrawal, were armed up a little bit. Now they have some air support both from the Iraqi Air Force and the U.S. Air Force, and have made real progress around that dam. That fighting still continues as of this morning, but it looks like they're starting to gain the upper hand and pushing those ISIL units, the terrorist organization units, back away from the dam. It is a strategic asset and something that would be important to take before they moved into Mosul.
So, yeah, that's Representative Mike Rogers on CBS's Face the Nation talking about the operation to secure the Mosul Dam. And next I'm going to show you a clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. This is reporter Terry Moran, also in Irbil, so he's pretty much on the scene. And he's reporting on the Mosul Dam and also what's going on with the Yazidi. And my favorite soundbite from this report and on the whole Mosul Dam operation is from Terry Moran here, where he calls the Mosul Dam a dam of mass destruction, as he'll explain the reason why over in this clip.
Good morning, Martha. The main battle in Iraq right now is about 80 miles west of here. U.S. air power supporting Kurdish troops on the ground in a desperate effort to retake that huge dam outside of Mosul, which in ISIS's hands is a potential weapon of mass destruction. The Mosul Dam fell 10 days ago, now defended by a few hundred ISIS fighters. U.S. and Iraqi officials are deeply concerned that ISIS might blow up that dam, which could release a wall of water 60 feet high through the city of Mosul and flood Baghdad, 250 miles away. The new U.S. strikes across Iraq this weekend are aimed at breaking the ISIS juggernaut. They've got all the initiative right now. More than a third of Iraq is now under ISIS control, including major cities like Mosul, Fallujah, and Tal Afar, and much of the border between Iraq and Syria. And everywhere they go, ISIS spreads terror in the name of their God. On Friday, another massacre of Yazidis, the religious minority despised by ISIS. Scores of men killed, women and children kidnapped. We spoke with a man from that same village. He fled with his family, 10 children, this week. We showed him pictures of the atrocity. There is no place in Iraq for us anymore, he told us. And as they squat outside of the already full UN refugee camp, there is no place for them to go. For This Week, Terry Moran.
Now, even though Terry Moran there in the end of his report there talked about the Yazidis, one of the interesting things about the U.S. mission in Iraq this last week is that we finished sending humanitarian aid to the Yazidis, and it turns out we don't really need to rescue them. I think that was in one of the previous reports. So the mission has actually kind of changed. Now it's not a humanitarian mission. Now it's more about causing or degrading the capability of ISIS. And I'm going to show a clip over from ABC's This Week. This is their military analyst, Colonel Steve Ganyard, where he talks about some of the great things air power has done. I think he's used to be in the Air Force. They mention in a later clip that he was a pilot. And he talks about the great things air power has done, but also the limits of air power, because air power can't defeat an ideology over... Let me make sure I get the clip right. Over in clip number 32 here.
This is different. It's moving beyond helping people, it seems.
Martha, it's been an incredible week, really, for American air power. You think about what we've done in just a few dozen strikes. We've held Irbil. We've prevented a fall of Kurdistan. We've prevented a humanitarian disaster up on top of Mount Sinjar. We've opened up an escape route for those refugees. And now we're conducting strikes around the Mosul Dam in an effort to prevent a humanitarian disaster that could potentially affect hundreds of millions or hundreds of thousands of people. But the president has said that these strikes will only be used for humanitarian purposes and will only be used for protecting U.S. citizens. So air power cannot defeat an ideology, and it's still up to the Iraqi government to beat ISIS.
That was an interesting report from Colonel Steve Ganyard over on ABC's This Week. And they also talked about this tweet that he put out earlier this week that it was kind of ironic. I wanted to show it to you all, even though I'm not going to show you where he talked about his tweet. Here's his tweet from earlier this week where he said, "Yesterday, a $28 million American Reaper shot a $70,000 Hellfire missile that blew up a $600,000 MRAP, which is this mine-resistant armored something or other patrol vehicle. I don't know what the P stands for, but given to Iraq, stolen by ISIS. Your tax dollars at work." So I thought that was kind of an ironic statement from Steve Ganyard that they talked about over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, or actually with Martha Raddatz. And then one other clip I want to show you from ABC's This Week is Martha Raddatz talk to Representative Adam Kinzinger, who's actually an Iraq War veteran and still a member of the National Guard, and apparently he's going back into service. And he talked about how what's going on in Iraq, since he's a Republican, he criticized President Obama and called what's going on the worst case scenario, as you can see over in this clip.
Well, look, I want to be very careful to say, you know, it's good that we started doing something, but what we're watching in Iraq and in Syria, frankly, is the worst case scenario for the Middle East. This cancer that's growing, that's consuming all over the place. Back in January, I called for airstrikes against ISIS, in fact, on this show, when they were just about 1,000 or 2,000 people. Today we see them in the tens of thousands, and they're only continuing to metastasize. I think what we've begun doing is very good. But I think we have to get even bigger and realize that the crushing and the pushing back of ISIS, not just in Iraq, but also in Syria, is utmost priority. And allowing the Free Syrian Army, who now finds itself in Syria surrounded by both the regime in Syria, al-Nusra, and ISIS, has got to be emboldened to be able to fight them back. They need the equipment and the weapons. This is the worst case scenario, and it's something that we have to be involved in stopping with the Iraqi government, with the Peshmerga. And I think we're on the right start, but there's a lot more to do.
So, of course, it wasn't just Republican Adam Kinzinger over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos criticizing Obama and calling this the worst case scenario. Over on Fox News Sunday, they spent a lot of time hyping the threat from ISIS and criticizing President Obama. But I want to show you this report from Greg Palkott, longtime Middle East reporter for Fox News. In fact, my first LiberalViewer video of all time, way back in 2006, I think it was called Fox News Makes Up the News in Lebanon, or Makes News in Lebanon, and it was criticizing a Greg Palkott report about the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And anyway, here's Greg Palkott hyping the threat from ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call it, calling them monsters and talking about all the atrocities they've committed. And I'm not a big fan of ISIL or ISIS or whatever you want to call it, but I just wanted to note how Fox News is spending the most time hyping the threat, you know, because they're the most in favor of military action there. And anyway, here's Greg Palkott's report on what's going on in Iraq on Fox News Sunday this morning in this clip.
Greg?
Shannon, Fox News has learned that U.S. jet fighters and unmanned drones continue to hit ISIS positions around that dam today, and what is clearly the opening up of a new front in the war against militants.
Peshmerga Kurdish fighters are on the move, advancing with Iraqi forces on ISIS militants in an attempt to retake the strategic Mosul Dam. Held by ISIS, there are fears they could let it burst or blow it up with devastating effect. In a coordinated action, the U.S. launched 9 airstrikes Saturday against ISIS positions at the dam. A local Peshmerga commander told us the terrorists can be beaten.
Absolutely.
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 That's the note. This as the humanitarian crisis builds. 400,000 refugees fleeing the militants crowding into one northern Iraqi province alone. 1.5 million are across the region. Relief workers are coping to keep up.
They are very needy. They need food, non-food items. They need shelter. They need medical support, like medical supplies. They need, and then psychologically they need help because they're traumatized.
Indeed, ethnic minority Yazidi refugees are still reeling from details of Friday's massacre of Yazidis in a village near Mount Sinjar. Some 80 men and teenagers were killed by militants, some at close range. At least 100 women and children were kidnapped. You cannot even say they are animals, this refugee says of ISIS. Even in the jungle, animals have laws. They don't abide by any laws. They are really monsters.
He called them monsters. There are, in fact, new reports of ISIS militants killing men and kidnapping women. U.S. officials tell us that they are investigating those reports.
So, yeah, Fox News was giving the most time to trying to tell people about the atrocities of ISIS or ISIL and calling them monsters, worse than animals because they don't even obey the law of the jungle and all that. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not an apologist for ISIS or ISIL, but I do want to show you a couple other quick Fox News clips on Iraq. First, I thought it was interesting that finally Fox News is on the side of cutting executive power, wanting to cut the... They asked both their politician guests who were talking about Iraq about limiting or getting a new authorization for use of military force, because what President Obama is doing in Iraq goes beyond the previous authorization for use of military force, and so Congress should have a role and limit executive power. And it was interesting to see Republican Ron Johnson over on Fox News Sunday agree with that position. In what will be the second to last clip on Iraq I show you here.
Continuing in Iraq, at what point do you feel like the administration needs to come to Congress for any type of authorization?
Well, first of all, it's a very good sign that President Obama is beginning to act. And, honestly, a couple of weeks ago, President Obama did invite about 8 or 9 members of the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committee into the White House to speak with his counsel about a new authorization for use of military force, which I think is pretty long overdue. They're finding out that trying to act militarily with the current authorizations in place is becoming pretty tenuous. So I think that's a good sign that President Obama is recognizing the fact that he's going to need authority to deal with this new asymmetric threat. And we just heard from Greg Palkott. I mean, ISIS method of diplomacy are beheadings, crucifixions, mass executions, or live burials, and enslavement of women and forced marriages. These are evil people. They need to be defeated. And I'm glad that President Obama is finally beginning to act.
So there you can see the Republican guest on Fox News Sunday building on the intro from the Fox News reporter Greg Palkott about the monstrous, worse than animal nature of ISIS or ISIL or this, new Islamic force in Iraq. And the last clip I want to show you on the Iraq situation is the Democrat on Fox News Sunday, Shannon Bream, the Fox News host, filling in for Chris Wallace, got the Democratic congressperson from New York, Eliot Engel, to actually buy into one of the old George W. Bush anti-terrorism slogans. You have to fight them over here so that we don't have to fight them over. You have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. And you can see how that got rehabilitated over on Fox News Sunday this morning over in this clip. Over in this clip.
A point where we are, despite as war-weary as this country is, that we are putting boots on the ground, or we're getting more heavily involved there so we don't have to confront them here.
Well, I don't think we're going to put boots on the ground the way we did before in Iraq. I don't think anybody really wants to do that. We do have some boots on the ground right now, and frankly, we need to do everything we can to repel ISIS. I don't think we have the luxury of putting our heads in the sand and saying, well, it's over there, and we're not going to do it. I think what we're doing now is effective. We've got to do more of it. And ultimately, we may have some boots on the ground there. It's not something I want, but you know what? We have bad choices, and the worst choice is to do nothing.
I thought that was kind of interesting because there was a Democrat, Eliot Engel, actually saying we may need boots on the ground in Iraq, which even President Obama, even Republicans, I've seen very few people actually advocate boots on the ground, although I guess boots on the ground is kind of a relative term because we have special forces, Marines, some people in Irbil. First we had 200 and now we have several hundred military personnel in Iraq. We just don't have like combat troops and a status of forces agreement. But anyway, that's the last clip I want to show you on Iraq. And now I want to show you 4 or 5 clips on the indictment of Texas Governor Rick Perry, which even though he's a Republican and I'm a liberal and a Democrat, I'm a little I'm suspicious about this particular indictment. I'll discuss that a little more, but after I show you some clips. But the first clip I want to show you is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They had a news report on this from ABC's reporter Jeff Zeleny, and I thought it was actually a pretty balanced report. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip here.
Rick Perry was on the rebound, eyeing a second bid for the White House. Now, a new hurdle. He's charged with 2 felonies in Texas.
We're going to set up a time for Governor Perry to come before court to be arraigned.
Count 1, abuse of power. Count 2, coercing a public servant. He's accused of trying to pressure a Democratic district attorney to quit or cut funding to her office.
Get the cuffs off of me now.
He said this woman, Rosemary Lemberg, lost the public trust after being arrested for drunken driving and belligerent conduct. She pleaded guilty but refused to resign. She'd already gotten under Perry's skin as head of the state's public integrity unit, investigating corruption and cronyism. On Saturday, the governor pushed back, saying the grand jury charges smacked of politics.
We don't settle political differences with indictments in this country. It is outrageous.
An unlikely Democrat defended him. David Axelrod, longtime aide to President Obama, tweeted, "Perry indictment seems pretty sketchy." The indictment presents a fresh political challenge, just as his comeback tour was going strong. It's been nearly 3 years since this.
Commerce, and let's see, I can't. The third one I can't, sorry. Oops.
When we caught up with him on a trip to Iowa, he was filled with optimism.
How tough is it, do you think, to make a second impression on these Republican voters?
Oh, I think second chances are what America's always been about.
And Jeff...
I thought that was kind of an interesting report, and it gave kind of background on Texas Governor Rick Perry, and included that debate moment where he tried to list 3 things and couldn't remember the third thing. I thought that was particularly appropriate to the Fox News coverage. They were the only one who had Rick Perry on, and they had a couple introductions to their interview with Rick Perry, and in both introductions, they didn't list the new indictment, the indictment of Rick Perry as the top story. They actually listed 3 different stories, and they listed the indictment as the third thing, maybe hoping that Rick Perry would, or that people would be like Rick Perry and wouldn't be able to remember the third thing, maybe, I don't know. Well, here's the first instance. This is from the introduction to the whole Fox News Sunday program this morning, Shannon Bream's narration, where the indictment is just sort of this recent news. They don't even say who was indicted over in this clip.
Then Texas Governor Rick Perry hits the campaign trail in Iowa, ramping up speculation about another presidential run. We'll talk with Governor Perry about 2016, his battle with President Obama over immigration, and that new indictment. It's a Fox News Sunday exclusive.
2016, immigration, and that new indictment. So maybe you forgot the third thing, and they don't even say who was indicted. And when they were actually introducing, when Shannon Bream introduced Texas Governor Rick Perry just a minute or so after that, she also listed 3 things, 3 like headlines he was involved in, and left the indictment as the third thing. And you can see that over in this clip.
That's what you're facing here. You've been indicted on 2 felony accounts, abuse of power. The grand jury indictment in Washington. Texas Governor Rick Perry has made a number of headlines in recent weeks. First, it was his center stage clash with President Obama over the crisis on our border. Then, his campaign stop in Iowa stirring speculation about a 2016 presidential run. But late this week, news broke that the governor had been indicted on felony charges over alleged abuse of power. Joining us now.
So you can see in the introduction, it was again 3 things. It was immigration, 2016, and then the indictment, maybe hoping people like Governor Rick Perry would forget the third thing. But I don't want to say that Fox News didn't confront Rick Perry at all. They actually read him the indictment, although he seemed very prepared for that particular question. And you can see, here's Shannon Bream reading the counts from the indictment, although I think she calls them felony accounts, but you can't really criticize someone for misspeaking a little bit on a live broadcast. Or anyway, and here's how Rick Perry defends himself against those felony accounts over in this clip.
Folks, what you're facing here, you've been indicted on 2 felony accounts, abuse of power. The grand jury indictment alleges this, that you, quote, with intent to harm another, intentionally or knowingly misused government property, and by means of coercion intentionally or knowingly influenced or attempted to influence Rosemary Lemberg, a public servant. She is the DA in Travis County. The head of the Texas Democratic Party said this, quote, Governor Rick Perry has brought dishonor to his office, his family, and the state of Texas. They're calling for you to step down. How do you respond?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand the details of this. And the DA, the highest ranking prosecutor in Travis County, who also has oversight for state officials, this individual was stopped driving while drunk. She had almost 3 times the legal limit of alcohol, 0.238, I believe is what it was. When you look at the video, not only of the stop, you look at the video of Miss Lemberg when she was being booked into the county jail, the abusiveness, she was kicking on the door, she was abusing the law officials, she had to be restrained. And when you look at that, and you have to make a decision on whether or not $7.5 million of Texas taxpayer money is going to go to the unit that she oversees, I very clearly, I very publicly said that as long as that individual was going to be running that agency, I had lost confidence in her, the public had lost confidence in her, and I did what every governor has done for decades, which is make a decision on whether or not it was in the proper use of state money to go to that agency, and I vetoed it. That's what the rule of law is really about, Shannon. And I stood up for the rule of law in the state of Texas. And if I had to do it again, I would make exactly the same decision.
No, I'm no fan of Texas Governor Rick Perry, but having read the indictment, it does seem kind of like the politicization of, or the criminalization of what should be a political dispute. And as a former criminal defense attorney, I don't like it when things are criminalized that shouldn't be criminalized. And since I kind of criticized Shannon Bream there for misspeaking about the felony counts being felony accounts, I have to kind of show a total misspeaking by the guy who's head of the group that initiated the claim against Governor Rick Perry that eventually became this indictment. It's sort of this watchdog group, and his name is Craig McDonald, and he actually misspeaks and says instead of that it couldn't be further from the truth that it's a political witch hunt, it's he actually says couldn't be closer to the truth, and I don't think the rest of his argument's that convincing over in this clip.
Yesterday at a news conference responding to the indictment.
I wholeheartedly and unequivocally stand behind my veto, and I'll continue to defend this lawful action of my executive authority as governor. We don't settle political differences with indictments in this country. It is outrageous that some would use partisan political theatrics to rip away at the very fabric of our state's Constitution.
I want to put your group in the context that some of your critics say, and that is they see you as a liberal group that goes after Republicans. George W. Bush, when he was governor, Tom DeLay, another, as well as Governor Perry. So I want to put that out there and then ask you why this should not be seen as a big blinking red political light.
Yeah, well, we have filed criminal complaints against politicians of both parties over the 16 years we've been in business. When we see corruption that's not being addressed by other means, we'll take some action on it. The governor, again, in his defense yesterday, said this is merely a partisan political witch hunt. Nothing could be closer to the truth. No politician in the prosecutor's office or the judicial system in Travis County has laid a hand on this. Our complaint went to the chief Republican judge, head of this judicial district, a Republican appointee of Governor Perry's. He turned it over and appointed a special judge, again, a Republican from San Antonio, to oversee the matter. That Republican judge appointed a special prosecutor because he thought the case had that merit. That special prosecutor is a Republican as well, who served under George W. Bush. No Democrat has had a finger on this. So for the governor to say this is merely a partisan witch hunt just doesn't stand in the face of the facts.
Well, I think that's enough time spent on the political future of Texas Governor Rick Perry, who I didn't think was really much of a contender for the Republican presidential nomination anyway, but I thought I would show a few clips on it, especially because I think the indictment against him is a little bit bogus. But I want to show you one more clip before I finish the show, and this is a clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They had this interesting report on transgender rights, and having just attended this gender spectrum conference and gotten all this education on gender expansive youth and gender identity and gender expression, I wanted to show you a few clips or the report they had from their reporter Byron Pitts, who actually quoted from a couple transgender youth, quoted from Laverne Cox, who is a transgender person who stars on the Netflix show Orange is the New Black, and then ends with this person, Karen England, who's an opponent of a bill that I actually helped or worked on as an activist for the ACLU, AB 1266, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that final clip over here.
Online, with Facebook users now able to choose between 56 different options for gender identities. And in fashion, with Barney's department store featuring an ad campaign with transgender models. All a far cry from Cox's childhood as a young boy in Alabama.
I was bullied and internalized a lot of shame about who I was as a child.
Bullied because?
Bullied because of my gender expression. Bullied because I didn't act the way someone assigned male at birth was supposed to act. There's a cultural environment where trans people are told who we are is a mistake and that we should try to be someone else.
It's estimated there are nearly 1 million transgender men and women in America. Many of them teenagers like 18-year-old Isaac Barnett and 17-year-old Michael Galvin.
I wasn't actually a girl except physically. I don't have to live a lie anymore.
I suffered for so many years because people said it was just a phase and that I'd grow out of it. And when I look in the mirror now, I see myself.
High school classmates in Kansas City, Isaac and Michael were born girls. They came out to the world as transgender in a YouTube video.
I've been living more like a guy since elementary school.
It used to be thought that 1 in 40,000 people had gender dysphoria, and now surveys are suggesting it may be as high as 1 in 250.
Gender dysphoria is now a medical diagnosis for those feeling a disconnect between their assigned and perceived gender. Despite the latest research and growing numbers, there is pushback. California's controversial law, AB 1226, allows transgender children in public school to use facilities and participate in activities based on their gender identity. Opponents call it the co-ed bathroom bill.
We want to protect all children, and especially the 99% that are going to have their privacy invaded by this intrusive law.
But according to the latest polling...
So that last part, they not only said 1226 when it's AB 1266, they also said that it gave new rights under California law when it actually just clarified California law, which already gave those rights. And anyway, I don't see much coverage of transgender rights on the corporate media, or I guess there's been a little bit more of it recently. And so I thought I would show you that last clip for the show. I hope you appreciated all the clips I picked out for you. I'm well over time, especially since I started late. It's been almost an hour and 40 minutes, so I guess I gotta finish up the show. I do appreciate those of you, more than 100, over 120 at some point, who were watching live and contributed your comments, which I read along the way. And I did see one comment that I wanted to answer as to what that noise was in the background for a lot of the show. You can see here NO8549 asked, does Sandy want to get in or out? And unfortunately, it's not that simple. Sandy actually just had surgery on her knee and is recovering. She's got a funnel on her head and taking medication, and she's just doing a lot of whimpering, and you heard some of that whimpering during the show, so I apologize for that. But Sandy hopefully will be getting better over the next few weeks. And anyway, like I said, I appreciate those of you who showed up for the live show, and I hope you appreciate the clips I picked out and my commentary, trying to give a little context to what's been going on in the news and what's been covered by the corporate media. I hope it left you a little more informed for the beginning of your week. And also check out my latest edited produced video that I uploaded this morning on this Fox News bias coverage of an atheist lawsuit to stop churches from acting like political super PACs. And so check that out. That's over on my channel, and I'll be making another Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup next week, hopefully starting on time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. I hope to see you there, and I'll be seeing you all around the internet.